So I want you to imagine a scenario right out of the commercial shipping world. Picture two massive cargo ships.
Right, like colossal vessels.
Exactly, hundreds of meters long, and they've both just dropped anchor side by side in the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay.
The water is incredibly warm, the sun is just beating down, and they're sitting in the exact same spot. Same high fouling water, exact same amount of time, let's say like 3 weeks.
A long time to sit.
Right. So finally, the trading orders come in, they pull up their anchors, the massive engines kick in, and they start to move. But one ship glides away with just a faint, thin layer of green slime on its hull,
It's the little slime, yeah.
while the other one is completely encrusted in these hard, heavy barnacles. Like, it's instantly losing massive amounts of speed and just hemorrhaging fuel to push through the water.
It honestly sounds like a theoretical riddle you'd give a maritime engineering student.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's actually a multi-billion-dollar operational crisis playing out across the world's oceans every single day.
And it forces a pretty obvious question, right?
Mhm.
If they were anchored in the exact same water, exposed to the exact same elements, why are their hulls in completely different universes?
Right. Why the huge difference?
So that is the mission of today's deep dive. We are unpacking the hidden multi-billion-dollar underwater war of biofouling.
It's such a fascinating topic.
It really is. And our main guide for this is a brilliant DeepDraft article by Captain Raghu Sharma, and we're supplementing his insights with some honestly pretty eye-opening data from the IMO.
The International Maritime Organization.
Exactly. So we're going to explore why a ship's unique underwater history matters far more than the water it happens to be sitting in, and why looking at a hull and saying, oh, it's just a little bit of slime is actually a massive red flag.
Huge red flag.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand the sheer scale of what Captain Sharma is talking about, you have to look at the reality of commercial shipping.
Right.
We're talking about an industry that accounts for roughly 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions every single year.
That's a massive chunk.
It is. So the efficiency of these vessels isn't just like a corporate spreadsheet issue. It is a global climate issue. And the biggest enemy to that efficiency isn't always some flaw in the engine design.
No, it's biology.
It's biology.
Yeah, and the Deep Draft article makes a very astute observation right out of the gate regarding that biology. Captain Sharma points out a deeply ingrained, highly dangerous commercial habit in the shipping industry.
Right. The way they view slime.
Exactly. Many operators treat a slimed hull as perfectly acceptable, simply because it lacks the visual alarm of a barnacle.
Yeah, they don't see shells, so they think it's fine.
The mindset is often, we don't see any hard growths, no shells, so the hull is clean enough.
I mean, I get the temptation to think that way. Slime just looks like mud.
Sure.
You'd assume the moment a ship that size hits 20 knots, the friction of the ocean would just wash it all away, like washing mud off a car in the rain, so to speak.
You would think so. But the reality is much more insidious. What we casually call slime is technically microfouling. It's not mud. Right.
It is a highly complex, living biological matrix. It starts with bacteria and diatoms settling on the steel. And these microscopic organisms, they don't just sit there.
What do?
They actively secrete what are called extracellular polymeric substances, or EPS.
Okay, I'm going to need a translation on extracellular polymeric substances.
I don't blame you. Think of EPS as a biological glue, or like a microscopic architectural scaffolding.
Okay.
These organisms manufacture this sticky, robust web to anchor themselves to the hull and protect their colonies from the harsh ocean environment.
Wow.
It's literally a living, breathing ecosystem clinging to the ship. And the moment that EPS matrix forms, the ship's hull is no longer presenting its highly engineered, perfectly smooth, hydrodynamic coating to the water flow.
Right, it's presenting something completely different.
Exactly. It's presenting a sticky, rough, biological carpet.
And the Deep Draft article actually highlights a fascinating detail about who notices this carpet first.
Yes, because it's almost never the captain or the deck officers up on the bridge. The warning signs start way down in the belly of the ship.
With the chief engineer.
Exactly.
The machinery always feels the biological burden before the ship's speed log even registers a drop.
How so?
Well, the chief engineer will be down in the control room, and they'll start noticing rising seawater temperatures in the cooling systems.
Because the intakes are clogged.
Precisely. The strainers, the massive filters that pull seawater in to cool the engines, they start getting choked with this biological matter.
Wow.
So the auxiliary cooling margins start shrinking dramatically because that sticky EPS matrix is literally growing over the sea chests and the water intakes. It's suffocating the ship's plumbing.
That's terrifying. And the deck officers up top, they only see the problem much later.
Right. They only notice when they realize the vessel is demanding way more fuel just to maintain the RPMs they ordered.
Okay, so I have the IMO glow fouling report data here, and I have to admit, I thought it was a typo when I first read it.
The fuel penalty numbers.
Yes. It states that a layer of slime as incredibly thin as 0.5 millimeters and covering just 50% of a hull can trigger a 20 to 25% increase in greenhouse gas emissions.
It's staggering.
I need you to explain that to me, because 0.5 millimeters is nothing. It is barely the thickness of a fingernail.
Right.
How does a fingernail's thickness of slime make a massive cargo ship burn 25% more fuel?
What's fascinating here is the underlying fluid dynamics. When you have a massive steel hull moving through the ocean, engineers want what is known as laminar flow.
Okay, laminar flow.
Basically, laminar flow means the water travels over the surface in smooth, parallel layers, with virtually no disruption or mixing. The ship's specialized paint is designed to facilitate that perfect slip.
To make it as smooth as possible.
Exactly. But when that 0.5 millimeter layer of EPS and bacteria establishes itself, it acts like microscopic sandpaper across thousands of square meters of steel.
Oh, wow. So it's destroying the laminar flow.
Entirely. That microscopic roughness creates a turbulent boundary layer. The water starts tumbling, eddying, and grabbing at the hull instead of just sliding past it.
And that causes drag.
Immense drag. And to overcome that drag and just maintain a constant speed, the marine engines have to work significantly harder, burning tons of extra heavy fuel oil.
Just to fight the friction.
Yeah. The research on these diatomaceous biofilms shows they increase skin friction so aggressively that the required propulsive power jumps by anywhere from 1.5% to over 10% before a single barnacle even appears.
That is wild. You know, if you're listening to this and trying to visualize the risk, think about your own dental health.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. It's like ignoring dental plaque. You look in the mirror, your teeth don't have a giant black cavity.
Which would be the barnacle in this scenario.
Exactly. So you tell yourself you're perfectly fine, but the plaque, the biofilm, is already there.
Right.
The smooth enamel surface is compromised. The structural damage is actively starting. And if you just leave it alone, you are guaranteeing yourself a massive, painful bill at the dentist later.
The dental analogy captures the urgency perfectly. Slime is not a benign, acceptable state. It's an active, compounding performance penalty.
The damage is already happening?
Exactly. The truly clean condition is already gone. And if you have a bad case of slime, the immediate commercial question becomes, well, how do we stop this from turning into a cavity?
How do we stop the barnacles?
Right. How do we stop the barnacles from taking over?
Which brings us right back to our opening scenario. Those two ships in Hormuz.
The sister ships.
Yeah. If they're in the identical water, facing the identical biological threat, why did only one get the barnacles? I mean, if everyone is using anti-fouling paint, shouldn't they both be protected?
You'd think so. But the answer lies in the chemistry of the coatings and the operational history of the vessels. The DeepDraft article really zeroes in on this.
Okay, walk us through it.
So there are two primary categories of anti-fouling coatings used today, and they work in fundamentally different ways. First, you have self-polishing copolymers, or SPCs.
SPCs.
These are engineered to achieve controlled surface renewal through a process called chemical hydrolysis.
Okay, chemical hydrolysis. Break down what that actually means when the ship is sitting in the water.
Right. So in an SPC coating, the biocide, which is the toxic chemical that deters the marine biology, is suspended within a polymer matrix on the hull.
Okay.
When the ship is moving, water molecules interact with that polymer chain. The water literally breaks the chemical bonds of the uppermost microscopic layer of the paint.
Oh, so the paint is designed to degrade.
Exactly. As the ship pushes through the ocean, the friction sweeps away that depleted, dissolved outer layer.
Ugh.
By washing away the dead paint, it constantly exposes a fresh, active layer of biocide underneath.
To fight off the next wave of organisms. Wait, so the paint actually needs the ship to be moving to work. If they get stuck at an anchorage waiting for a port to open up, they're basically sitting ducks after a while.
They absolutely are. When a ship with an SPC coating becomes static, that mechanical renewal from the rushing water just drops to zero.
Because there's no friction.
Right. The hydrolysis slows down significantly. The paint is still slowly releasing its biocide into the surrounding water, but it's doing so without stripping away the top layer to reveal fresh ammunition.
So it just runs out of juice.
Eventually, yes.
Yeah.
That exposed top layer just runs out of defensive chemicals. Now, a young, freshly applied SPC paint with plenty of chemical reserves can hold a hole at the slime stage for a little while during an idle period. But the clock is always ticking.
And then there is the second category of paint, right? Fouling release coatings, or FRCs.
Yes, these are usually silicones or fluoropolymers.
And the interesting thing Captain Sharma notes here is that unlike the SPCs, FRCs aren't actually toxic. They don't try to poison the biology. They're just engineered to be incredibly slippery at a molecular level.
Exactly. Their entire defense mechanism relies on minimizing adhesion. So if a ship with an FRC is sitting statically in the Strait of Hormuz, the slime, the soft growth, and eventually the barnacles will absolutely settle on it.
The biology doesn't care that it's silicone.
It doesn't care at all. But the mechanical bond between the organism and the silicone is exceptionally weak.
Because it's so slippery.
Right. The operational theory is that once the vessel pulls up anchor and hits a sufficient trading speed, usually around 10 to 12 knots, the sheer hydrodynamic force of the water simply washes all that accumulated fouling right off.
Just leaving a clean hull.
Leaving a clean hull.
But, and this is a huge but, that assumes the highly engineered coating is actually intact. And this is where Captain Sharma introduces a concept that honestly completely changed how I view this industry.
The certificate illusion.
Yes, the certificate illusion. Because an onshore fleet manager might be sitting in an office in London or Singapore looking at a spreadsheet, and they see that Ship A and Ship B both received identical, premium, million-dollar anti-fouling paint jobs during their last dry dock.
Right. Their coating certificates match perfectly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture...
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, go ahead.
No, it's going to say, if we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to see the danger of managing ships via paperwork.
Exactly.
That certificate is nothing more than a historical receipt of what was applied on day one.
Yeah.
It tells the onshore manager absolutely nothing about the operational reality of that vessel's underwater profile today.
And the DeepDraft article gives a brutal, real-world example of this illusion. Imagine a vessel leaves dry dock. It has high-spec, top-tier paint. It looks absolutely pristine.
Sure.
But a month later, it gets chartered to trade in ice conditions. As it pushes through the frozen water, the ice physically scrapes, gouges, and shreds the protective polymer layer right at the boot top, the waterline area. The certificate sitting in the office file hasn't changed. But the actual chemical defense system on the steel is completely destroyed in those scraped areas.
And the hazards go far beyond ice. The coating can be compromised by tugboats aggressively pushing against the hull during docking.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of tugs.
Yeah, or by the ship rubbing against hard jetty fenders, or even by the ship's own anchor chain abrading the bow. Any physical scratch or scrape breaches that carefully engineered chemical matrix.
And even if you avoid physical damage, you still have to worry about sitting still too long.
Right. You have to account for what engineers call the static tolerance threshold.
The idle time limits.
Yes. Most standard coatings are engineered to sit idle for maybe 14 to 21 days.
Just 2 to 3 weeks.
That's it. Once a ship crosses that 3-week mark at anchor, the chemical defenses of the paint rapidly and aggressively deplete.
So an idle day in port isn't just a day on a calendar. It is a compounding penalty.
Think of it as a biological exposure clock. Let's go back to our two sister ships in Hormuz.
Okay, Ship A and Ship B.
Right. Ship A is 8 months out of dry dock. It's been sailing constantly, and its coating is completely intact. Ship B is 44 months out of dry dock, has localized paint damage from tugboat pushes, and just spent a month sitting idle, waiting for a berth in another port before arriving in Hormuz.
So they're in totally different chemical states.
Exactly. The aggressive biology in the water is attacking them both equally, but Ship A still has the chemical margin to fight it off and remain at the slime stage. Ship B's margin evaporated a long time ago.
And when that defensive margin completely fails, the microfouling evolves. The environment shifts from bacteria to larger organisms. We cross the tipping point into macrofouling.
The dreaded barnacles.
Old barnacles.
And this is the moment the physics of the problem shift from bad to catastrophic.
How so?
Well, slime, as we discussed, is an active penalty. But the true danger arrives with cyprid larvae.
Cyprid larvae.
Right. These are the microscopic final larval stage of a barnacle. They swim through the water, exploring surfaces with sensory antennas.
Looking for a home.
Yeah. And when they find a ship hull with depleted paint, they cement their heads to the steel, undergo a radical metamorphosis, and begin synthesizing hard calcified calcium carbonate shells.
And once they have shells, you are suddenly in a completely different world of hydrodynamic risk.
Absolutely.
And the article also points out that these larvae aren't polite about where they decide to build their little calcium fortresses.
No, they are not.
They don't just spread out evenly across the wide, flat bottom of the ship. They actively seek out the complex niche areas. They flock to the bilge keels, the narrow gaps around the rudder, the bow thruster tunnels, and the grates over the sea chests.
They prefer those niches because the flow dynamics in those localized areas offer better feeding opportunities. And frankly, because those tight angles often receive a weaker, thinner application of paint during dry dock compared to the vast flat sides of the hull.
That makes sense. It's harder to paint a grate than a flat wall.
Exactly. But the consequence for the ship is that hard growth concentrating in those specific structural areas generates severe, highly disruptive turbulent flow.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Well, and honestly, I refuse to believe this data point without a deeper explanation, so you have to make this make sense for me.
Okay, let's hear it.
The IMO glow fouling report outlines the impact of just a light layer of small calcareous growth. We're talking about tiny 5-millimeter barnacles.
Very small.
The report states that if you have a massive 320-meter crude oil tanker and those tiny 5-millimeter barnacles cover just 1% of the hull, it can trigger a 55% increase in greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
A 55% fuel penalty from a 1% coverage of tiny shells. How is that physically possible?
I completely understand the skepticism. It feels wildly disproportionate until you view it through the strict lens of fluid dynamics.
Okay, explain the fluid dynamics.
As humans, we naturally focus on the total surface area. We think, well, 99% of the ship is clean, so it should be fine.
Right, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
But fluid dynamics doesn't care about the clean averages. It cares about the localized disruption. Think about a high-performance sports car designed in a wind tunnel. Now imagine you take a handful of jagged, irregular rocks and you bolt them to the hood and the side panels.
Oh, you'd completely destroy the aerodynamics.
Exactly the same principle applies underwater. Those 5-millimeter barnacles act like boulders in a stream. The water can no longer flow smoothly over the hull.
Because it hits the shells.
Right. As the water hits those hard calcified shells, it fractures into chaotic, tumbling eddies. That localized turbulence spirals outward, fundamentally altering the hydrodynamic profile of the entire vessel.
It's like throwing a wrench into a machine.
Yeah. The water is effectively grabbing the ship, creating an immense drag envelope that the engine has to fight against every single second.
And the hull is only half the battle. The sources also include technical guidance from Navisia.
The Naval Sea Systems Command for the U.S. Navy.
Yes, and they highlight the propeller as a completely separate nightmare. They note that early biofouling on the propeller alone causes severe slip and vibration. The propeller blades physically cannot bite into the water cleanly.
Propeller efficiency is extraordinarily sensitive to even microscopic surface roughness. The Navisia data points out that simply mitigating propeller roughness, just keeping those blades perfectly smooth, yields a 1.2% fuel avoidance metric.
Which, out of context, sounds incredibly trivial. Like if I saved 1% on my gas mileage, I wouldn't even notice.
But you have to scale the math to commercial shipping proportions. These massive vessels are burning dozens, sometimes over 100 tons of heavy fuel oil every single day.
Right.
If you save 1% of that fuel across a fleet of 50 or 100 ships operating 300 days a year, you're talking about millions upon millions of dollars in capital savings.
And a staggering reduction in the sheer tonnage of carbon dioxide pumped into the atmosphere. So let's play this out operationally for our ship B in Hormuz. The margin has failed. The chief engineer's cooling temps are spiking. The deck officers see the speed completely falling off.
Things are going wrong.
Right. The ship finally gets a diver inspection, and the photos confirm the worst. The hull is covered in calcified barnacles. They are burning 55% more fuel.
The nightmare scenario.
The obvious immediate commercial instinct for any shipping executive is going to be, get a dive team out there right now with scrapers and scrub that hull clean.
Of course.
But the DeepDraft article practically shouts from the rooftops that cleaning is not a magic reset button.
It is arguably the most destructive misconception in the maritime industry. Ship operators view a diver with a brush as a clean slate, a way to hit undo on their idle time.
It doesn't work that way.
No, because the methodology of the cleaning dictates the future survival of the paint. The industry has to understand the massive fundamental difference between proactive grooming and reactive cleaning.
Okay, so proactive grooming is what you do at the slime stage, when the hull only has microfouling, right?
Yes. Proactive grooming utilizes very gentle, low-force tools. We are talking about advanced remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, equipped with very soft bristle brushes, or precisely calibrated low-pressure water jets.
Just to wipe the slime away.
Exactly. Because the slime is just a biological EPS biofilm, it can be gently wiped away without physically damaging the delicate chemical matrix of the anti-fouling paint underneath.
So it's safe for the coating.
The research demonstrates that this kind of gentle, regular maintenance clears the biological penalty with zero accelerated wear to the coating.
But reactive cleaning is what happens after the biological clock runs out. The barnacles have established themselves.
Right.
And they don't just gently hold on, they secrete a biological cement to bond those hard calcified bases directly into the pores of the paint.
They fuse with it.
So to get them off, a soft brush won't do anything. You have to use aggressive mechanical scrubbing, wire brushes, and hard scraping forces.
And that aggressive source is the fatal flaw. When a diver or a heavy-duty machine violently tears a mature, cemented barnacle off a ship's hull, the calcified base does not just neatly detach.
What happens?
It forcefully shears away a significant chunk of the underlying anti-fouling paint right along with it.
Oh man, so what does this all mean for the ship? It reminds me of trying to get a stubbornly baked-on bug off the clear coat of a nice car.
That's a great way to picture it.
If you take a harsh wire brush to it and scrub as hard as you can, sure, the bug is technically gone, but you have completely gouged and destroyed the clear coat underneath.
Yep.
You're left with a scarred, scratched surface, and now every single speck of dirt, road grime, and salt is going to violently stick to that scratch forever.
That is precisely the mechanical reality for the ship's hull. The scraping leaves a pitted, scarred, highly irregular topography. More importantly, the chemical defenses in those gouged areas are deeply compromised or completely removed.
So they've solved the immediate problem, but created a worse long-term one.
Exactly. The operator might temporarily solve their speed problem and satisfy the current charter contract, but they have fundamentally ruined the long-term viability of the hull.
Wow.
That rough, unprotected surface guarantees hyper-accelerated fouling the very next time the ship sits idle.
Huh.
The barnacles will come back faster, stronger, and in greater numbers.
And we can't ignore the environmental fallout of this either. The IMO has issued specific guidelines, MEPC.1 918, strongly warning against harsh reactive cleaning.
Because of the biosecurity risk.
Right. It's not just about protecting the ship owner's paint investment. When you aggressively scrape mature living barnacles and biology off a hull in a foreign port, you are indiscriminately releasing highly invasive species into a local, delicate ecosystem where they simply do not belong.
This raises an important question about how the modern shipping industry manages preventative maintenance.
How so?
Well, the standard operating procedure can no longer be waiting for the severe speed loss to trigger a reactive scraping. As Captain Sharma so forcefully notes in his article, a slime report from a diver is not an acceptable status quo.
It's an alarm bell.
It is a ship's final economic warning. It is the very last window of opportunity to intervene with gentle, proactive grooming before the vessel crosses that irreversible threshold into hard macrofouling.
It's the check engine light. And too many operators are just putting black tape over it because a layer of green slime doesn't look as scary as a cluster of
A
barnacles.
very expensive piece of tape.
Definitely. So bringing this all back to where we started, the stark difference between those two massive cargo ships sitting in the exact same warm water in Hormuz isn't random luck.
No, not at all.
It's not a mystery of ocean currents. It is the completely unique, often hidden operational history of that specific hull. It's the chemical age of the paint, the physical damage it suffered from a tugboat 6 months ago, the number of idle days it racked up waiting in a previous port, and whether it was gently groomed or violently scrubbed in the past. Slime is an active, punishing performance penalty, not an acceptable standard.
The water they sit in is common. Their whole history is completely unique.
Right.
If the global shipping industry actually wants to hit their strict greenhouse gas reduction targets over the next decade, they have to stop treating marine biology as a secondary reactive concern.
It has to be front and center.
The complex chemistry of the coating and the rigorous operational discipline of the crew and the onshore management team have to work perfectly in tandem.
It really is an incredible invisible war happening right under the surface of global trade every single day.
It is.
And it leaves me with a thought that builds on all this vulnerability. If biofouling is this dynamically aggressive and this responsive to idle time, and humans are entirely reliant on these static chemical coatings that inevitably deplete, degrade, and fail.
Where does that leave us?
Right. Are we rapidly approaching a future where commercial ships will need continuous, autonomous, robotic groomers permanently attached to their hulls?
Oh, that's an interesting concept.
Just picture it like a fleet of underwater Roombas constantly sweeping the steel while the ship sails across the Pacific just to survive the biological arms race of the oceans.
Given the billions of dollars in fuel and the massive climate implications on the line, I'd say that is one of the most vital engineering challenges for the next decade of maritime innovation.
Definitely something to mull over the next time you look out at a massive cargo ship on the horizon. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Captain Sharma's insights and the hidden world of ship biofouling. Until next time.